My name is Aaron Smith. Pleasure for you guys to be here today with me. Thank you so much for liking, subscribing, watching the channel. We're growing, slowly growing, so make sure you share it with your friends if you're enjoying the content. But thank you guys so much for all the support. I am coming to you from Culp's Hill, and I'm actually on the lower part of what we would call Upper Culp's Hill. Culp's Hill is divided into two sections. We have Upper Culp's Hill. That's the part where the tower is, the observation tower, the statue to Greene. He's up there as well. I'm kind of in that lower swale between Upper Culp's Hill and Lower Culp's Hill, and I'm here to talk to you guys about July 2nd. I think Culp's Hill is a criminally underrated part of the Gettysburg battlefield. Not a lot of people make their way out here. This is a really, really cool part of the field. There was a lot of action that happened here, and this hill was vital to the Union line. Of course, we have the Baltimore Pike just over to our, that way, to our west. The Baltimore Pike was an incredibly important supply line for George Meade and the Union Army. That road went all the way down through Littlestown to Westminster. Ultimately, of course, it led to Baltimore and then Washington, but Westminster was the Union's supply depot for the Battle of Gettysburg. Westminster is a town in Maryland, the seat of Carroll County, probably about 20 miles as the crow flies south. So it was an incredibly important depot. The railroad tracks had a stop. It actually ended, I want to say, the Westminster and Baltimore Railroad, one of these convoluted railroad names back in the day, but either way, the railroad ended in Westminster. So it was a super, super important town for the Union. So George Meade wanted to make sure that he was able to protect his supply line. Of course, he had the fallback plan to the Pipe Creek line, which is going to be another video. I think that's really, really cool. I think that's a not often talked about segment or backup plan, whatever have you, of the Battle of Gettysburg. That's really interesting. I think a lot of people will really be interested in that. So I'm probably going to do a video from like Union Mills, Maryland, which is a really neat place. Again, that's right off the Baltimore Pike headed south here. But either way, Culp's Hill, Cemetery Hill covered George Meade's two supply lines, the two roads that he controlled into Gettysburg. So Culp's Hill was an absolutely important position on this field. As you can tell, I had my handy dandy Lano map book with me. I actually did a tour here. The Park Service offers free tours of Culp's Hill. They don't post their times online in the off season anymore, so you have to call the park or check in at the visitor center to see where it is. I was lucky enough to be out here with park ranger and good friend Matt Atkinson, who put on an excellent tour of this area. I learned a lot about Culp's Hill. I will be totally honest with you, viewers of Forward Gettysburg. Culp's Hill is probably the section of the battlefield that I have the least confidence in my knowledge about, but we have to go outside of our comfort zones in order to expand our knowledge and in order to get better. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Culp's Hill. So, situation. End of July 1st, Union Army has been beaten back from the north and the west of town. They take up positions on Cemetery Hill, and that evening George Ewell recognizes the importance of Culp's Hill, and he's going to order Maryland Stewart to take it. For whatever reason, Maryland Stewart, one of Ewell's brigade commanders? Sorry, he's going to order Allegheny Johnson. You know what? All these geographical names, they just swirl around up here, and I'll pick one out, and oftentimes it's the wrong one. Regardless, he's going to order Allegheny Johnson to take Culp's Hill because he recognizes the importance of this hill. Allegheny Johnson, for whatever reason, is going to be delayed in getting his troops moved, and they're not going to be able to take this hill. So fast forward to July 2nd, the plan is almost going to be, they want a simultaneous attack on both flanks. Longstreet's attack is going to kick off around 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the afternoon. The action here is not going to start till much later. We're talking an hour and a half, 2 hours later. So they're not simultaneous attacks, so they're not as effective. However, by the time that Allegheny Johnson is able to get his men organized and into position for an attack, this entire line of the Union is going to be stripped away. The only brigade left here is going to be the brigade of the 12th Corps under George Sears Greene under Geary's division. George Sears Greene is actually a very, very intelligent general. He is 62 years old at the time of the battle, so he's definitely up there in age for the Union in terms of the elderliness of their generals, have you. However, he's not a dumb man. He realizes that he could turn Culp's Hill into a fortress, and that's what he does. While Johnson's over there dilly-dallying around waiting for the attack, one Confederate soldier actually writes, while we're sitting down waiting for our orders, the men up here, the Union, are busy hacking away, chopping down trees, making these fortifications. And you can see some remnants of these fortifications to this day. If we look here at this grass line here, it's kind of a raised elevation there. That's actually the Park Service in the 30s. They rebuilt some of the fortifications, and today when they mow, the mow line here is actually where the fortifications are, and you can trace this all the way up to Culp's Hill. So it's really cool that they have that. Not a lot of people realize that. I have waxed philosophical to you many times about how I love Spotsylvania, because you can see the fortifications themselves. Here at Gettysburg, we don't really have that that clear visual mark of the original fortifications, but nonetheless, if you follow this mow line here, there's going to be fortifications. And Greene is an engineer. He's a smart guy. So not only is he making fortifications in the direction of where the Confederates are going to come from, he's making traverses as well. A traverse is a line that might run perpendicular or slightly obtuse or acute to the main trench, and they're mostly going to be used for communication, supplies, stuff like that. So he has this series of trenches up here. And at that time in the Civil War, trenches were considered ungentlemanly. They were considered cowardly. They didn't want to, they thought that you were a coward if you were hanging behind breastworks. And I apologize. I shouldn't be using the word trench, because they weren't trenches. They were breastworks. They were fortifications. They were felled trees. A lot of the men on this line were men from New York, men from Ohio, these very burly woodsman type of individuals. A lot of them carried axes with them in their pack. So they cutting down trees was like second nature to them. So they would cut down a lot of these trees and mound up the dirt and put the trees on top. And sometimes they might have a headlog. Speaking of headlog, I realize this is now my first video without wearing a hat. So you get to see my bald head in all its glory. So, I'm sure that will garner hundreds of likes and subscriptions to the channel. Bald is beautiful. But getting more on track here, they'll have headlogs. And the thing is that these fortifications, these breastworks, they're going to be pivotal to the Union defense of this ground. So not only are the Confederates making their way up a fairly steep slope filled with rocks, filled with underbrush, trees, very inhospitable ground to assault over, but now they have to face these breastworks further up the hill where it gets much steeper, especially in the area around Forbes Rock. And I can tell you from personal experience, I wanted to visit Forbes Rock one day. I didn't take the easy path down. I took the incredibly hard path up by the, what is it? It's the 1st Maryland, I don't think it's the Home Guard Monument, but I decided to take the road less traveled down that way to Forbes Rock rather than taking the nice park trail. And yeah, it's steep. It's steep. I experienced just how steep it was firsthand. And this is not necessarily a body made for intense, high incline, woodsy trail walking. So I got an experience. I lived in a very cushy way what they would have lived assaulting this hill. So George Sears Greene, he's going to build these fortifications. Now, like I was saying a little bit earlier, on July 2nd, Longstreet's attack is taking place on the left side of the Union flank. Of course, we have the wheat field, the peach orchard, Devil's Den, all these now infamous places where a lot of blood was shed. So the Union Army is going to start to take away a lot of the 11th Corps men, and this area is going to go from 8,400 men down to 1,400. And the funny thing is these 7,000 men that they take, they're actually going to get lost on the way to support the Union line. As Matt said, he said they went down to the outlets. So they're going to get lost. So now George Sears Greene and his brigade of 1,400 men, they're left to defend against a division of Confederates that made up something just shy of 5,000. I want to say the exact number was 4,700. So now they are outnumbered nearly 4-1, and they are facing an imminent assault. I'm right here on July 2nd. You can see the 137th New York Monument right over here. This is going to be the far right of the Union line on Culp's Hill on the evening of July 2nd. So the 137th New York, they're going to occupy this line right here, and then just through the trees there, you might be able to make it out. That's the area we call Lower Culp's Hill. They're going to then create through that swell, they're going to form a line as well. So their line is essentially going to be like this being Lower Culp's Hill, this being the beginning of Upper Culp's Hill, alright? Confederates are going to attack. Now we get into Maryland Stewart. Maryland Stewart is going to bring his brigade here. They're going to attack. And Maryland Stewart's brigade is actually going to split into two. So they're going to come like this, and they're going to end up in that swell right down there. And they're going to take fire on both their flanks from the portions of the 137th New York. And the 137th New York, they're having a great time. Here are these Confederates walking in right into their line of fire. They're having a great time picking these guys off. This is easy pickings. We got Culp's Hill. This is ours. This is ours. They're not going to be able to attack us here. They're not going to be able to get through. What they don't realize is that Maryland Stewart split his brigade into two sections. And right now, the 137th New York, they're only facing off against two regiments. The other four regiments being the 1st North Carolina, the 37th Virginia, the 23rd Virginia, and the 10th Virginia. They're going to make their way around that Lower Culp's Hill, Spangler Spring area, and they're feeling out for the far right of the Union line. And eventually they're going to hit the Union line. So now the 137th New York, they're having a good time shooting them in this swell, but now they're going to be facing fire from their rear. So what they're going to do, Colonel David Ireland, Colonel of the 137th New York, he's not really too interested in taking fire from the rear on his regiment. So what they're going to do is they're going to fall back, and they're going to fall back into the traverse line that George Sears Greene had the forethought to create. So they're going to fall back into the traverse line, and just like on Little Round Top when Joshua Chamberlain refused his flank, David Ireland is going to refuse his flank. They're going to refuse the flank of the 137th New York. Now eventually what's going to happen is, as I flip through my handy dandy notebook here, I want to make sure I get the brigades right here for you, is they're going to start to be reinforced. So we're going to have some elements from the 1st Corps that's posted up on the hill. They're going to come down and reinforce this section. We're also going to have the 71st Pennsylvania. They're going to come and reinforce the flank here. And the 61st Ohio and 157th New York. Now the 71st Pennsylvania, they are going to be surprised actually by the 10th Virginia. They're going to fall back. I have to get double check on this, but I want to say the 71st Pennsylvania. Yeah, 71st Pennsylvania. That's the 1st California. So they're going to fall back. They're going to retreat. They're going to get surprised by the 10th Virginia. So they're going to be. This line's going to be reinforced here. I want to say that the heroic defense of the 137th New York on this flank is incredibly comparable, if not equal to the defense of Little Round Top. However, Colonel David Ireland is going to die, so he's not going to be able to write all these great stories and tales and recollections of his time here at Culp's Hill like Joshua Chamberlain's going to. This is a really, really nice part of the battlefield, guys. A place that not a whole lot of people visit. Really, really neat. And what you're going to notice here is you're going to see 2 rows of Union monuments here. And part of the Union defense is going to be a defense in depth. So they're going to have these frontline regiments here. They're going to fire for an hour, hour and a half till they start to run low on ammunition or the men get tired. And then the next regiment behind them is going to come forward, and they're going to swap out positions so that the defense of Culp's Hill, they're going to be able to create this continuous fire that is just going to overwhelm the Confederates. The Confederates, they're going to be able to take the position and occupy the positions on lower Culp's Hill, and they'll occupy those throughout the night of July 2nd. However, come July 3rd, it's a little bit out of the scope of the video, and I definitely need to be doing a lot more research and reading before I feel any type of confidence talking about July 3rd on Culp's Hill. But on July 3rd, those 7,000 men that got lost down at the outlets at Gettysburg, they're going to come back. They're going to come back across Pardee Field, and they're going to push the Confederates back, and the Union is going to be very stout and confident in this position here on Culp's Hill. Really, really neat. Really, really neat part of the battlefield. Please get out here and enjoy it. Like I said, the Park Service, they do tours out here. I believe they call theirs Culp's Hill the Forgotten Flank. Different park rangers do it different times of the year, but it's a really, really nice program. I really learned a lot. I highly recommend you get out here and check it out. I'd like to end with a story, a very sad story, of Gracie the dog. And Gracie was a stray dog. She was found by one of the Maryland regiments in the Confederate Army, and the men loved her. The men adored this dog. As you can imagine, the soldier's life was a hard life, especially soldier in the Confederacy, and this canine helped to bring just a little piece of home to them out on the war front. And it's going to come to Culp's Hill, and Gracie's going to be with her men, and it's said that Gracie's going to lead the charge, and Gracie's going to bark at the Union soldiers. It's almost as if she knew that the hands that feed her wore the butternut and gray, and the boys in blue weren't her friends. And she's going to bark, and she's going to lick the wounds of the wounded and the dying Confederate soldiers on the field. And sadly, Gracie is going to be shot that day. Gracie's going to be wounded several times, and it's said that Gracie's last dying act is that she is licking the hands of a Union soldier right before she takes her last breath. So kind of a sad story, but kind of a neat story. One of those many little human interest canine stories that are all around this Gettysburg battlefield. So thank you guys so much for joining me. This is a rather quick, short video, but I wanted to get one in. I would be incredibly regretful if I didn't do something about Culp's Hill. As I learn more and get into it more, I'll certainly do something a little bit more in depth. Maybe talk about July 3rd a little bit. Maybe get into some of more of these regimental actions. But this is just kind of a brief overview. Before I end, I want to kind of conclude George Sears Greene's story. George Sears Greene, he was born in 1801. He's going to die in 1899. And I want to say in 1894, in order to get his pension, the pension of a brigadier general, I believe, which is what he was here, he's actually going to be sworn in front of Congress as a brigadier general, and he's going to be the oldest sworn commander of the Army, commander in the Army, ever in American history, at 93 years old. So pretty interesting. Very interesting guy. Doesn't really get a lot of a spotlight like some of your other brigadier generals, like Strong Vincent or Stephen Weed, or a lot of these more famous guys on the left side of the Union line. But definitely an interesting guy. I definitely wanted to read a little bit more into him, see what he was all about. But thank you guys so much for joining me today at Culp's Hill, at the right flank of the Union on July 2nd. I hope you really enjoyed the video. Please remember to like and subscribe. I appreciate all your support for the channel. It means so much, and I will catch you on the next one.